Hey there, marketing research students and SPSS users. In this brief tutorial, we'll be using SPSS's chart building tool to build some nice looking charts. In this particular exercise, what we're going to do is we want to compare males and females on their differences in their willingness to pay for Stone Levitation Ale versus a Bud Light 6-pack. For those of you who might not be familiar with this particular study, again, we're using the Spring 2014 Craft Beer 200 record subset. The question I'm talking about is, in the questionnaire, we asked a series of questions. But this particular question, we asked individuals to imagine if they were looking to purchase a 6-pack of beers for either themselves or for their beer-drinking friends. While at the store, they saw 2 6-packs available for purchase. These are the 2 6-packs, a 6-pack of Stone Levitation Ale, a well-known craft beer in the San Diego market, or a Bud Light 6-pack, another well-known beer, but a macro beer. We asked individuals what's the maximum price they'd be willing to pay for each 6-pack while still considering the purchase to be a good value for the money. The order of the 2 6-packs was randomly presented. Sometimes people saw Bud Light first, other times people saw Stone Levitation Ale first. And individuals were then able to select whether they'd pay $2 or less, up to $13 or more, with the overwhelming majority of respondents paying between $3 to $12 for each 6-pack. In most cases, the typical value, I believe, was somewhere between $8 to $9 for Stone Levitation Ale and about $6 or $7 for a Bud Light 6-pack. From these 2 variables, we created a single variable, the BR price, Stone price premium. All we did was we took the simple difference between these 2 codes. So if someone scored a 9, meaning they'd be willing to pay $9 for the Levitation Ale, and they scored a 7 on the Bud Light 6-pack, the BR price, Stone price premium recode would be scored a 2. 9 minus 7 is 2, meaning they'd be willing to pay $2 more for a Stone Levitation Ale 6-pack. We'd like to see if there's differences across gender on how much they're willing to pay for these 6-packs. One way, amongst many, that we could visualize this relationship is by going to the Graphs chart building tool. First, let's create a simple bar chart that compares these 2 groups. So we'll start here. This is our general splash page. Let's make a simple bar chart. Simple bar chart's well known. We can select on our x-axis the gender variable, and our y-axis will be the price difference variable. So over here in the upper left-hand corner, like we're used to seeing, are all of our variables. I will display variable names and find my gender recode variable. And then I will look at my price premium on the y-axis. And by default, your element properties pane should have opened. You can toggle it here if you haven't. Let's take a look at the bar. Our statistic is the mean, so on average, it'll report the average for each group. For the x-axis, let's go ahead and apply those changes. For the x-axis, you'll notice we have males, females, and then a tiny handful of people refused or identified themselves as other. For these individuals, for this particular analysis, let's exclude them from the analysis. So let's click on them here and click the red box, and we can apply those changes. Okay, and we've set up our basic chart here. Let's go ahead and hit OK and run this. And based on this particular chart, we can see that the price premium, women do in fact appear to be, on average, willing to pay a slightly higher price premium for Stone Levitation Ale compared to a Bud Light 6-pack. This chart in of itself is okay, but we could do a little better. Let's take a look at the actual dispersion characteristics of these differences. Let's make a slightly different chart. Let's go to Graphs, Chart Builder, hit OK. This time, instead of making a simple bar chart, let's do a slightly more powerful chart for this purpose. Let's make a box plot. Box plots allow us to look at both centrality characteristics of groups as well as their dispersion characteristics. Let's make a simple box plot here. I double-clicked on the simple box plot. Now for this box plot setup, you should notice a few things. First of all, our other or refused group came back, so we're going to drop them back out of the in our settings. It did still guess that our gender variable belongs at the bottom, so we don't have to change that. And our dollars willingness to pay is still along the y-axis, so we don't have to change that. If those dropped out of yours for some reason, just drag them back in. Again, let's go to element properties. Let's go to our x-axis, to the other or refused, and let's drop them out. Hit apply. Okay, apply the change. Now we can go ahead and run this syntax again. This time, we get a nice box plot. Box plot again, shows both centrality and dispersion characteristics of the groups. What is this showing us? Well, first, for males, these thick black lines within the boxes represent medians, not averages, medians. So again, we see the median value for females is a little higher than it is for men. So we see that women, the median value, they are willing to pay a slight price premium. Next, this box is the interquartile range for each group, meaning the middle 50%. In other words, 50% of the males were somewhere between $5 and looks like about $2.50 or so, $2 in terms of what the premium they're willing to pay for levitation ale. Whereas for women, median values, the interquartile range is a little higher. Next are the whiskers. These whiskers are essentially the range of values notwithstanding potential outliers. So precisely, these whiskers are exactly 1.5 box lengths long. So the male box is exactly the shape. 1.5 of these boxes encapsulates the range. So we see approximately, since the boxes are approximately the same shape, we see a similar amount of dispersion, although we see a little more dispersion in potential values for women compared to men. Finally, we see these circle values with numeric codes next to them. These are potential outliers. In the case of a box plot, this simply means any case that was more than a 1.5 box lengths away from the central box. So in this case, we had one individual who's male, code number 141. If we went back into the data set, which we have 200 pieces of data, if we went and saw record 141, we'd find a male who's willing to pay -$4 for Stone Levitation Ale compared to Bud Light. In other words, this person is willing to pay a lot more for Bud Light than Stone Levitation Ale. Now for women, on the other hand, we see two outliers. Both of them have a value of 11. So they're paying $11 more for Stone Levitation Ale compared to Bud Light. They must not really like Bud Light. So we see a code of 184 and 31. They're hovering over the exact same dot. There's an overlap. These two individuals here are willing to pay, again, $11 more for Stone Levitation Ale. We can also do a little more. We can double click on this chart if we want to format it a little bit. We have some options available to us. We can double click into where it says gender into single column. Into single column is the syntax, the label that we had for this recoded variable. That's not too helpful for someone looking at this chart and reading a report. So we'll switch this just to gender. And then for our y-axis, dollars willing to pay difference between Stone and Bud Light and Bug Light. Oop, typo. Let's go ahead and double click on that and change it to dollars more willing to pay for Stone versus Bud Light 6-pack. And give it some sort of shortened name that's a little more useful to someone reading this. There we go. There's a lot of other settings that you can tweak and adjust inside the chart editor as well. For example, we can add in a footnote or a title under the options. So for title, we could give chart a meaningful title here. If we click on the overarching box, notice the light yellow line that marks up here. We could switch the colorations of the background. Probably not yellow. Probably some sort of empty default color would be quite appropriate. White. There we go. We can do a few other things. So we click through these settings. We can click on bar options. We can widen the bars a little bit. We can change how the box plot and error bar styles look. We can adjust the formatting of each individual Y and X axes here. Change the size to, say, 12. Again, all these things can be easily played with. You just kind of check through the different properties that are available to you, check under the different options lines, how we can do these sorts of settings. Again, I stress I don't necessarily find that the chart editor in SPSS to be the most elegant editing interface in the world, and every once in a while there'll be something would go a little wrong. But the goal that you should have while you're building these types of charts is have the chart correct, even if it doesn't look beautiful first. Have all the data there, formatted in the right setting, have everything the way you want it to look, then go into the chart editor afterwards and go ahead and play around with it to get it to look the way that you want. So let's say we're very happy with our chart now. You can easily right-click to copy special. You can copy it as an image, Windows Meta file, so it can be imported into a Word document with ease. Okay, so that's one of the brief introductions into some of the chart building options that SPSS offers to us. We'll come back with some other videos and look at some other tools and devices soon.